You believe that vetting people at the border is racist, do you not?
No, I've never said that.
You would allow someone in our country illegally convicted of manslaughter, convicted of domestic violence in your jail. ICE says, please hold him when his time is up. We want to get this criminal out of our country. And you said no. Sheriff, I don't mean any disrespect, but you ought to be ashamed of that. How can you possibly be for public safety if you hate our immigration laws so much that you would have let?
Senator John Kennedy stepped into the Judiciary Committee hearing and immediately went on the offensive against Durham County Sheriff Clarence Burkhead. What followed was a tense, high-stakes exchange where Kennedy pressed the sheriff over policies that critics say allowed dangerous criminals to slip back onto the streets. From the very beginning, Kennedy framed the issue as a serious loophole created by sanctuary-style policies, one that he argued could allow violent offenders to walk free instead of being held for federal immigration authorities.
We call our counties parishes, beautiful county. Is it at least part of your job to protect the public?
Yes, it is.
Okay. You believe that vetting people at the border is racist, do you not?
I'm sorry?
You believe that vetting people at the border is racist, do you not?
No, I've never said that. I believe that having secure borders is important, and we have processes that allow individuals to come into the country the right way. Absolutely.
You believe that people should be able to violate federal immigration laws without consequences, don't you?
No, sir, I do not. I believe that anyone who violates federal or state law needs to be held accountable, and there need to be consequences.
You don't believe in cooperating with ICE, do you?
I believe in cooperating with federal authorities, as I do. A number of federal agencies I cooperate with, and I certainly would cooperate with ICE if they would cooperate with me.
Okay. You were elected in 2000, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. On April 18, 2018, you gave an interview with a media organization called Indie Week. Do you remember that?
I'm familiar with the paper, yes.
Okay. Here's what you said. I'm quoting you, your words, not mine. I disagree with the incumbent sheriffs. That's the guy you beat. With the incumbent sheriff's cooperation with ICE. I will make a clear and uncompromising commitment to not cooperate with ICE. As sheriff, I will not honor ICE detainers, and we will not participate in ICE roundups, end quote. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In April of last year, you spoke to a group of ICE employees. Do you remember that?
Not particularly, no.
Okay, well, there was an article in a media organization, a media entity called The Assembly. Are you familiar with them? Do you remember?
I've heard of the Assembly, yes, sir.
Yeah, do you remember giving them an interview?
I give several interviews.
Sure.
I actually don't remember that particular one, but I'm...
Okay. Well, here's what you said in the interview, apparently on the record. These ICE employees that you spoke to, you were referencing them, and you said, quote, they, these ICE officials, asked me, so Sheriff, if someone is about to be released from your jail and the detainer is about to expire, you will call us and let us know? What was my answer? You said, no. because that's not what the law says. No, I will not call ICE. End quote. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
And, sir, Senator, that was before the new law, which is now House Bill 318, which requires me to make that second phone call.
Right. Yeah.
Prior to that, it was not state law, which I follow and all my deputies follow.
Sure.
And so now we do make that second phone call. But ICE agents are notified whenever someone is entered into processed into my jail.
Do you need some water? Because I think your pants are on fire.
Okay.
Do you remember a gentleman by the name of Carlos Heriberto Mendoza Martinez?
Not right off, sir, no.
Okay. Sheriff, you should. He was in our country illegally from Mexico. He was in a street gang. Back in Mexico, he was convicted of manslaughter. And he was in your jail. And because in 2021 and 2024, Mr. Martinez was arrested for assaulting a woman and domestic violence. And ICE placed a detainer on this guy because he was in our country illegally. And he was a criminal. And he was in your jail. And you wouldn't honor that detainer, would you?
I can't say that I did not honor the detainer.
I can.
I can say what I did honor was the conditions of the release that were issued by a judge. And so, therefore, and once again, ICE was notified that they could come pick up this
Do you really
individual.
believe in public safety?
Yes, sir, I do.
You would allow someone in our country, illegally, convicted of manslaughter, convicted of domestic violence, in your jail. ICE says, please hold him when his time is up. We want to get this criminal out of our country. And you said no?
ICE was notified that they could come pick up the individual, and for some reason they did not. And the judge issued the conditions of release. I am a custodian. I do not determine who is released or held. I follow the court's order.
Sheriff, I don't mean any disrespect, but you ought to be ashamed of that. How can you possibly be for public safety if you hate our immigration laws so much that you would have let a convicted murderer back on the street? Do you really hate immigration laws that much?
Senator, it's not a matter of that I hate immigration law.
You could have fooled me, Sheriff.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your service.
Kennedy didn't waste a single second once the hearing began. The moment he got the microphone, he zeroed in on a question that put Durham County Sheriff Clarence Burkhead on the defensive. Why does his office treat federal ICE detainers like they're nothing more than junk mail? Kennedy refused to let the sheriff drift into broad talking points about inclusivity or community relations. Instead, he went straight for the heart of the issue. With a calm but cutting tone, he asked, "Sheriff, are you telling this committee that a federal request is just a polite suggestion?" From that point on, the pressure never let up. Kennedy argued that the idea of community trust doesn't hold much weight if citizens can't trust their own sheriff to keep dangerous criminals off the streets. In his view, sanctuary-style policies flip the concept of safety on its head. The exchange quickly turned into a dismantling of that narrative, starting with Kennedy's very first line of questioning. Then the temperature in the room rose when Kennedy began reading through criminal records. One by one, what he listed offenses tied to individuals who had previously been in the sheriff's custody: assault, theft, and drug trafficking. According to Kennedy, these were people who federal authorities had asked to be held, yet they were released. He paused, locked eyes with the sheriff, and asked a question that hung heavily in the room. When someone you released goes on to harm an American citizen, whose responsibility is that? For a moment, the room went quiet. The sheriff appeared stunned as Kennedy laid out his argument that policies like these can carry real consequences for innocent families. Kennedy's next move was to shift the conversation from policy to law. He reminded the sheriff that the Constitution's Supremacy Clause establishes that federal law takes precedence over conflicting state or local actions. In Kennedy's words, that principle isn't optional. He pressed further, saying that wearing a badge doesn't give anyone the authority to ignore federal immigration law simply because of political disagreement. You took an oath to the Constitution, Kennedy said firmly, not to a political caucus. The remark underscored his belief that the debate isn't about ideology, but about whether officials follow the law they've sworn to uphold. The exchange reached its most intense moment near the end of the hearing. Kennedy shifted the discussion to what he called selective enforcement. He asked the sheriff whether he would ignore other federal warrants, like those involving tax evasion or environmental crimes, if they didn't align with the local political climate. The question lingered, and the sheriff struggled to provide a clear response. Kennedy used that moment to drive home his central argument. The issue, he said, isn't really about public safety strategies, but about local officials stepping into national political battles while citizens bear the consequences. By the end of the confrontation, Kennedy made it clear that he believes the so-called Durham approach risks public safety rather than protecting it. In Kennedy's view, the debate ultimately comes down to one principle: whether the law should be applied equally and consistently. Throughout the hearing, he framed his role as holding public officials accountable and demanding that legal obligations be taken seriously. Supporters see moments like this as an example of tough oversight, while critics see a political clash over immigration policy. Either way, the exchange left a strong impression. Kennedy presented himself as a senator determined to prioritize the safety of citizens and challenge policies he believes allow criminals to slip through the cracks. The hearing ended with the sense that the argument over sanctuary policies and who should control immigration enforcement remains far from settled.